Welcome back, everybody out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. This is your co-host, John Brower. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Joyce Chen from the Conscious Leadership Group. If you listen to part 1, you already know that Joyce has provided some amazing insights to help our managers and supervisors stay above the line, stay out of the boss hole zone. And today, she's going to take us through the drama triangle. We ended part 1 just as she was beginning to introduce us to that, and now the waiting is over. You're going to get a chance to hear it. Part 2 is as impactful as part 1. We're so glad to be able to bring this special guest to you. And so settle in. Let's hear more from Joyce Chen. The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
And so knowing how we show up on the drama triangle is another huge self-awareness tool that we use. So I actually have the cards where I can explain it. The first base on the drama triangle is called villain. And that's when we point blame and criticism at others or ourselves. And everybody tends to do this. It's a natural reaction. Something goes wrong and we say, you did it. It's the system. It's this leader. It's anything that's not my fault. And then with a lot of leaders I work with, they point back at self, which is, I should have known better.
Yes.
I did something wrong. I should have done it differently. Every villain needs a victim. So the next base we tend to be on is victim, which is a sense of like, woe is me. I feel powerless to do anything. This is terrible. Poor me. It's like this. It's a victim consciousness around not being able to do anything about your circumstances or feeling like it's not in your control.
Doesn't matter what I do. It always ends up this way. Yeah. Woe is me. Yes.
Yeah. Then hero is the third. And hero is it can be a dangerous base because many companies reward hero behavior. Mm-hmm. Hero behavior is something we can get promoted for. It's when we seek temporary relief. We just want it to be better in the short term, but it's not necessarily a sustainable solution. So a heroing leader is somebody that fishes for everyone else and doesn't teach them how to fish. And hero can be really dangerous in the case of overachiever over here, or how my boss showed up, in that it often leads to burnout or exhaustion, which then you're of no help to anyone when you're at that point, and you're role modeling that for others, which is demotivating and not healthy for the organization. We tend to oscillate between these three bases anytime we're below the line. And knowing how you show up on the drama triangle, I think, is really helpful self-awareness tool, because it's just a shortcut to understanding more quickly that you're below the line if you are, and how below the line you are. If I were to role model a really quick drama triangle, say I'm working on a project for 6 months and then suddenly the company tells me it's deprioritized. We're going in another direction. And in that moment, in victim, it's like, oh, why do I always work so hard? And then the company just does whatever it wants. And then in villain, it's, they don't know what they're doing. This place is so messed up. If they don't have their priorities straight, they don't know how to lead this company. Back in victim, I'm so tired of this. It's not fair. And then in hero, it's like, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to keep working harder, and I'll just tell my team it's fine, and we're working on the next thing and everything's okay. And I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm a team player. You can see how the drama triangle shows up, and we're on all three bases for, it could be anything that we go below the line around. And it just helps it's a practice of what we call making the invisible visible. It's bringing some unconscious beliefs, thoughts to the actions to the front of our awareness so we can see, oh, how am I going below the line? How is this showing up? And which bases might even be the most prominent for me? When we get on the drama triangle, we tend to get a little bit agitated too. So it's one of the things I love about that exercise. It re-stimulates some dysregulation or some activation that's happening in the system. And so when you do the drama triangle, you tend to notice there's some fear in the system. There's some threat in the system. The next step that we do after the drama triangle is just noticing. Can you acknowledge that you're scared? This is huge. Acknowledge fear. So many leaders that we work with, when we ask them, are you scared? They say, I'm not scared. I'm just stressed out. I'm just frustrated. And they can't locate, feel, name that fear is in the system. And it's so important to notice that fear is the controlling feeling that's happening when we're below the line. And so if we don't address that, if we don't look at that, we're not really giving our systems the ability to like down-regulate out of a state of dysregulation or reactivity.
Joyce, I don't know if in your preliminary conversations with Sarah, although I'm pretty sure she did, in our world at Real Good Ventures, we use objective data. We have 4 diagnostic tools that help our clients see things objectively, focus on the data, not the drama, one of which is the predictive index. And PI, I don't know if you've ever taken it, but it helps a person understand their natural wiring that they've had since they were 8 to 10 years old, their natural self, or what we call their behavioral or leadership DNA. But there's another thing it measures is their perceived need to adapt. And we find oftentimes when managers are sort of drifting into the boss hole zone, and then many times there is little or no self-awareness and no adaptation, and they are just driving as hard as they can. But then there are other circumstances where people are adapting in a way that is so contrary to who they are, they're totally lost. They're burning out. They have no bearing point and no ability to really rationalize what's happening. And you could see, just by your description, see how that pulls them down, or they drop down below the line, whether it's victim or villain or hero. That's such a powerful reflection for managers listening to this right now of where am I right now, and how displaced do I feel from who I really am to what I feel like I'm supposed to be for my team, and putting on this facade or persona and just not finding that fulfillment. I agree with Sarah. The imagery that you create, no surprise with your expertise in marketing, is just so vivid and helpful for people listening to this.
I love what you're saying, because what you're pointing to is the difference between presence and reactivity, above the line, below the line.
Yeah.
And how different the energy with which presence shows up in curiosity, in trust and acceptance and learning, versus the energy of reactivity, which is fear, defensiveness, being closed off, righteous. And leading from those two energies, you can make impact both ways, for sure. But from above the line, we're just way more available to solve what's in front of us. There's like 100x probability of a better outcome. There's no ceiling on how successful or like how fulfilled we can be from that place. And it's also a different experience of leadership. So I know I talk a lot about outcomes, or I have so far, but you get to choose your experience of how you're leading. Do you want it to feel miserable, stressed out, anxious, and suffering, pressurized? Or do you want to choose a different experience where it gets to feel open, playful, collaborative? And we get to choose that. We've all worked with leaders, probably what you would call boss holes, who have no awareness of where they are above or below the line. They are making some degree of impact, but because they don't know where they are, there's not a chance that they're going to be able to shift it. Where they're solving from, everybody has a certain experience of that kind of leader, and that leader is having a certain experience for themselves. It's not wrong or bad to lead from below the line, but there is another way that could drive better outcomes and create a much better experience for yourself and everyone involved.
So just to recap, first thing people can do is notice where they are. You're either above the line or below the line. And it's not about the stuff. The content is not the issue that we need to pay attention to. It's the context from where we come, above or below the line.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the somatic wisdom, the intelligence of our body. I know that the conscious commitment number 3 is about feeling all feelings. And there's even direction in the book about how to find that feeling in your body. Would it be worthwhile to speak about that for a quick moment?
We could do a whole podcast just about that.
Good.
Oh, yeah. And I would have very specific people that should listen to that podcast, because when you start talking about feelings, like, well, what are we talking about? There's a business. What are we talking about feelings?
Yeah. Well, feelings we define them as sensations that occur in and on the body. And feelings, there are a million feelings, but the Conscious Leadership Group, for the sake of simplicity, we distill them into 5 core feelings. So sadness, anger, joy, what we call creative energy, also called sexual energy, depending on what word you choose, and fear. We distill into 5 core feelings. And we like to say that feelings are just like data. They're messages that your body wants you to be aware of. And so most of us go about our days and we're just operating from here, from the head center.
Yes.
And we've learned through our life experience or through the workplace that this is what's acceptable and anything below the neck is not as valuable.
Yeah.
And we actually say heart intelligence and body intelligence are wiser than the brain. So the brain takes in 4 million bits of information a second. The body takes in 11 million bits of information a second. It is an older form of intelligence that lives inside of each human. The body is smarter than the brain. An example I like to give of that is, have you ever felt your face get hot even before you have the thought, I'm angry?
Yes.
That's happened to me where the thought I'm angry doesn't even show up for like 2 weeks because my mind makes it so not okay for me to be angry about whatever's happening. But something happens, someone says something, my face immediately gets hot or my jaw clenches or my hands clench. And so my body's letting me know anger's here and there's a message inside of it for me that's worth listening to. But because of how I've been conditioned personally over here, I was around a lot of below the line anger as a child. And so as I grew up, I learned and I told myself a story. Anger is not okay. It's inappropriate. It's destructive. And so I don't let myself feel anger. It's a suppressed thing in me that I'm always working through. But when I came across cross-conscious leadership and started to learn every feeling, every one of these 5 feelings has a core message it's just trying to give you. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just delivering information. Am I willing to listen to that to see how it might inform how I move forward and navigate the unknown as a leader? Because that's what leaders are doing all day. And part of why we take leadership positions is our ability and willingness to navigate the unknown. Each feeling has a corresponding message. And for anger, it's something needs to stop or change. So from below the line, anger might look like blame or criticism. And from above the line, it's just what needs to stop or change. And am I willing to listen to that, pay attention to that?
I love the productivity of an above the line emotion that we might perceive as negative, like anger. It is a clue, an indication, a prompting perhaps to notice or answer the question, what needs to change versus I'm not supposed to feel this way. I know that when in the material, which I'm a big fan, I'm really trying to be a student of the 15 commitments that, first thing you do is ask, where am I? Where am I, above or below the line? Number 2, do I accept myself for being there? And I know a lot of times when I feel below the line or when I am below the line, I'm like, oh, you're such a loser. Like, why do you always go there? Why do you have to be such an egomaniac? And the judge and jury in my head just go crazy. But can you accept yourself for being there? Oh, villain. Yeah.
Villain. There you go. That's right.
Bad person. Can you accept yourself for being there? And then are you willing to shift? Not without awareness of the brain and the body. And I'm guessing with practice, Joyce, this gets easier for people.
Oh, so much. It takes so much practice. And so I would say the shift from what we call to me to by me, understanding how to shift from a state of victim consciousness to a state of creator consciousness, moving from below the line to above the line, being able to locate, accept, and then shift, that could take 10 years to get really masterful or adept at. And so it's just a practice. As soon as we start, we're going to see some meaningful improvement, I think. But a lot of leaders say, why am I still dropping below the line for this long? Or why did I go below the line this many times in a week? And it's like, well, because you're human and we don't want to bypass that in any way. You're just reactivity, not a problem. And you're just learning this material. So having some compassion for the self as we're practicing this and building that muscle, because it is a muscle that we all have and we're just building, is an important thing to keep in mind. But what I love you're pointing to is the structure of, if there's 4 steps to learn inside of conscious leadership, what are they? And the first is, where am I? In any moment, any second, can I notice if I'm above or below the line? Could I even be so astute at noticing, like, 2 breaths ago, I was below the line. Now I'm above the line. You could be above the line before you walk into your in-laws house, and then you take 1 step in the door and somebody says something, you could be below the line. It changes that fast. So being able to notice at any given moment. Then the second is, can I accept myself for being where I am? When we talk about fear, noticing fears in the system, oh, there's just a scare here. My ego is perceiving threat to either approval, control, or security. All human beings want that. And if we perceive we don't have that, or it's being taken away, or it's being threatened, we will dip below the line. And can I just be with the scare that's here for a few breaths or as long as I need to be in a state of acceptance. You don't have to accept the problem that you're dealing with. You're just accepting your reactivity. And then the third is, am I willing to shift? A lot of times we say we want to shift, but we're not quite willing yet. We're not done with blaming and criticizing. We're not done with the drama. We're not done with our righteousness. And so being really aware, am I actually willing to shift, or do I just need to stay where I am for a little bit?
My mom used to say, she'd say, you can be upset, just set the timer. Give yourself a window, give yourself permission to be where you are, but turn it off at some point.
Yeah. Well, and I think having that compassion for being where we are, and then the awareness around, am I actually willing to shift, is so important, because a lot of people will just jump and pretend to be above the line when they're not. And that doesn't work, because you're not actually in a state of presence. You're just pretending to be in a state of presence. And so you can't really fake being above the line, or people can sense it. Checking on willingness is really important. And then the last is, how will I shift? And inside of this book, The 15 Commitments, every chapter is a tool that helps you shift if you're willing.
If I can go back to the word fear, we talk a lot on the Boss Hole Chronicles how organizations inadvertently shove managers and supervisors into the boss hole zone because they don't prepare them. I mean, they said, hey, we want you to, that thing you did by yourself as an individual contributor, we now want you to help this group of people understand how to do that. But they don't give them any equipping or prepare them in any way. And talk about creating this sense of uncertainty and fear. That'll push somebody right below the line. And the organization could have mitigated that by this. I mean, by helping them understand how to be a conscious leader. Here are practical steps. Before we even give you direct reports, we're going to equip you. And this seems like such an easy way to do that.
So well said. When we're having issues with what's out there, creating any kind of pressurization on us, what we do over here is we go in and down. We explore ourselves through self-awareness. We understand our reactivity, and we learn to manage that reactivity, because unless we know what's going on in here, it's impossible to be in relationship with what's out there in a healthier way. I see a lot of organizations spending a lot of money trying to clean up toxic cultures, or quitting all of a sudden, silent quitting, conflict resolution, harassment cases, investigations. The amount of money organizations are sinking into the downside of not investing in a conscious culture upfront is huge compared to an investment upfront in teaching people the skills to have self-awareness and to manage reactivity, building that conscious culture from the ground up. And then you're equipping people with the tools to be in relationship with each other, to have alignment, collaboration, to be able to create with each other, to have compassion for themselves and each other, when we're just a bunch of human beings trying to get stuff done together.
Right.
Yeah. It's so good how you describe all of that. Joyce, you've talked about many of the bottom line results, like the ROI on being able to do this and what it can create in terms of healthier decisions, better decisions. But I do think the human factor, I think this saves lives. And I literally mean save lives. I know several leaders, one most recently found himself in the hospital, not for the first time, but undergoing some heart procedures. Very healthy, very fit, very active lifestyle, but it's that pressurization that you've described. And it's real and it's present. And our response to it is, I think, what can make or break us. So I'm over here claiming the business case is, I want these leaders to be alive, not just full aliveness, but to continue to be alive, to do the work they do, and to find a way to experience life without that, giant globe sitting on their back. Because for all the reasons it's there. But now there's a methodology and some simple tools, questions, an approach we can use to mitigate the natural response, which is to fall, to crack under the pressure, and to have our heart not work right. This is the stuff that leaders need to be paying attention to. At the end of the day, it will help them understand this is not about the work. It's about you and the person you're being.
I couldn't agree more. I could go into a whole thing about the prevalence and the rise of autoimmune diseases, what that has to do with stress, how our body reacts to stress, how our body reacts to the suppression of emotions. The more we deny, repress, push away our humanity, the more it starts to show up in our bodies. The body will whisper, it will yell, and then it will scream to let us know when something's wrong with that alignment that's trying to come through.
Well, maybe that's a good reason to have you back.
Yeah. Would you be game for that, Joyce?
For a sequel.
Of course.
What I do want to tell our listeners is you are available, and we will have in our show notes a link to your LinkedIn profile, much more specific information about how to contact you through the Conscious Leadership Group, because that is what you do. You coach leaders and teams to use these tools.
Yes. And we do trainings. We'll come to offsites. We have different engagement level training programs that we offer for companies that are interested in doing this kind of work and weaving consciousness into the fabric of their organization. And by the way, I noticed I didn't define conscious leadership, and that might be helpful. We define conscious as being in the here and now in a non-triggered, non-reactive state. And we like to say that because as we talk about presence and reactivity, so many of us as leaders are going about our day and just being reactive, and we have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it look like to have intention, awareness around being in a non-triggered, non-reactive state? And then leadership, we define as those who are willing to take responsibility for their impact and influence over others. So by that definition, you don't need to be a manager or appointed a leader as long as you're willing to take responsibility for how you impact and influence those around you. We consider you a leader. I really believe that inside of everyone, there is a conscious leader, just as inside of everyone, there is a boss hole. And so we have choice around that. We have awareness. With awareness comes choice. What do we choose? What do we want to experience? What do we want to create in the world? And that's totally up to us. And these tools really point us in how to do that.
This may be one of my all-time most favorite episodes. Thank you for imparting just your wisdom and the cool way you outline this for us today. Very helpful and will be very useful to our listeners.
Great. Well, I'm so happy to be able to talk about this. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about it, and I'm happy to keep talking as much as you guys want. So thank you for having me and for bringing this to your listeners.
Yeah, it is truly our pleasure. And it is a certainty. We will see you again in the future. If it's okay, I'd love to reach out again. But for now, we want to say thank you. And we'll see you all next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.